Hello, everyone. It's July 12th, 2018, and this is the weekly Backdrop Dev check-in. We get together every week and talk about development progress on Backdrop and peripheral projects around Backdrop, the software. Let's see. We always start off with any updates from the project management committee. We don't have any things to announce this week, so we will just proceed onward. Talking about website related development tasks. So websites that are around Backdrop, including backdropcms.org, the forums, and things of that nature. I don't think that there's been substantial updates to backdropcms.org. I did mention during the outreach meeting that we made a new security page. I think, Gregory, you may have had a hand in making that security page. Thank you for putting that together. And so now we have backdropcms.org/security, which previously was just a listing of all of the individual security notices, but now there's some more description there about what the security team is, how it works, a little bit more about reporting issues if you have a problem there, how to subscribe to the mailing list, lots of kind of important details. So that new page is there, and then we moved the security notifications to a dedicated page as well, so you can still access all of those in the same ways before. Other than that, I don't think there's substantial updates to backdropcms.org itself since last week.
Yeah, we have a new site as well for the Drupal contrib updates site. So we have a dedicated site which will help us to keep the modules that got merged into core up to date. So I haven't started doing actual work on that, but eventually I will need some help. Maybe the next dev meeting I will have some updates. But all to say now is that the site exists, and we can start now. We're not blocked.
Yeah, that really gave me a little chuckle because it's Drupal contrib updates, isn't that what it's called? And so it's DCU, which is like, DC Comics Universe. That's what. So DCU.backdropcms.org is where that lives. Although, yeah, there's not much to see yet at this point there. All right, let's see. I also want to give a little recap on the translation or the localization server, since it's been a while since we've mentioned anything there. I was just revisiting where we are on that this past week, and it hasn't received any changes, but it's oddly not really blocked by anything at the moment. So the localization site is localize.backdropcms.org. And you can go there. There's a link in the agenda that shows you Backdrop CMS itself, like its translation status page. And the localization site got its own repository under backdrop-ops/localization. That's the full localization server. And there's a roadmap there, issue 5, that Olaf started a while ago, basically saying what we need to do to move forward. And the last issue, or the issue that we're currently on, is a note saying that the string extractor, the POTX module, has problems. But we fixed the problems with the POTX module months ago, and Olaf has confirmed that there's no problems with it anymore. So it looks like what we're now waiting on is just an official release of the POTX module, because it seems to be working fully at this point. And then we're effectively unblocked on doing large-scale translations of a lot more projects. But similar to the Drupal localization server, I believe that right now the process of uploading, like extracting the strings from contrib modules or from core, is an entirely manual process. So every time a new version of a module comes out, some volunteer has to go in, run the POT extractor on the new release of the contrib module or the new release of core, upload it to the localization server, and then other volunteers can actually do the translations of those strings. So we're set up to at least match that functionality right now. I think that we could do better by like automating the process of running the string extractor as part of the packager. But I think that we're pretty well set to accomplish like basic large scale translation at this point.
So you want like a server-side cron job to do that type of deal?
I was thinking, so backdropcms.org, the packager runs through when a new release is made on GitHub and modifies the .info files. Backdropcms.org could also run the string extractor at that point, and then send that information over to the localization server. Of course, that's talking about a little bit of custom implementation there and having two sites talk to each other. So it could be a little bit ambitious. Your idea, though, Jeff, is actually a really good one, where we could have the localization server just check for updates, of all the contrib projects, and then just on cron jobs, like download the zip files, run the string extractor on the code, and then create a node. And then it wouldn't have to do any kind of cross-site communication. It would literally just check the latest releases and then download and expand the files, and then run the extractor on there. And that would be nice, because then we wouldn't need any remote APIs. It would just be, create the localization information using the direct PHP code from that server. Yeah, great ideas. So anyway, I think I just wanted to point out the fact that we are in a good place there for the localization server. I think that we just haven't put any attention towards it recently, because things get stuck and then we get distracted with other things. But that's a really great area for taking that one to the finish line, basically, and making that really an official service of Backdrop CMS, because it's really close to completion.
With regards to how many languages, I see only 4 listed at the moment.
Yeah, so you can make it, and once you have an account on the localization server, I think that you can, like you can make another language just like on the fly. It just entirely is like, if you want to translate it into another language, then you can create the language and then start translating strings. I think that's true. Let me see. Releases.
There's a
I'm not actually sure how this module works, so.
There's a left-hand navigation that has a translate link, like a menu there, and then it asks you on the right hand to pick a language, and then a project. And at this moment, the project is all Backdrop CMS, Drupal, or Explorer. Anyways, the UX could...
Yeah, UX is not great.
Yeah, it could use a little bit of an improvement. And the progress is just a bar. It doesn't say any percentages. That could be.
Yep, very true. And so also interesting, like this localization server, this is not running Backdrop. This is literally a Drupal 7 site, which is the same thing that localize.drupal.org is running. So because localize.drupal.org is actually translating all of Drupal 8 modules as well, even though it's not a Drupal 8 site, the rationale here was that it's like, well, the localization server doesn't need to be running Backdrop, like in order to translate Backdrop. It has all of the capabilities we need, and it doesn't really matter what software it's running. So for now, it's a Drupal 7 site.
Yeah, it makes sense. At some point, if we port the respective modules, we can switch it if it's worth the effort.
Totally. So even though it's unblocked, it's not actually ready for large scale translation. I'm just saying that the technical limitations are currently unblocked, at least.
Yeah. The more people start using it, the more we can tweak and make the experience a bit more like streamline the process of translating things.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for the peripheral websites. Let's talk about Backdrop itself. The next bug fix release is going to be 1.10.2. There is a list of issues that are 1.10.2 anticipated to be in those. We've got a couple of them merged. It looks like a couple of more issues have moved back into needs review status in this past week. So I'll take a look at those as soon as possible. The only issue that we've got that we've been bringing up for a long time as being of large importance is the database credentials in settings.php. Their syntax changed in a minor way that can affect some sites that manually type in the settings.php database credentials. And we have a suggestion there on how to make it so that we could make that a little bit more robust in issue 2904. We have a workaround in that issue. We just need to expose some more information to the user about when we're using the workaround. So no real updates on that one. 2904 still needs work. That's it for 1.10, unless there's anything else that you guys would like to add. No, okay. So 1.11. 1.11 is our next minor release, which will be coming out September 15th, 2018. And we've been seeing a lot of improvement in a lot of different areas over this past week. First up is Contact Module. Contact Module's been getting a lot of improvements recently. We have a new settings form page, draggable categories. There's a lot of suggestions in a large meta at 3023 that has a number of items that could be implemented, and all of them are pretty good ideas. I know this past week, a new sub-issue was added to that, 3190, which makes a very reasonable suggestion of, now that we have a settings page for the contact module that's not just the categories page, we should duplicate the permissions for who can submit the contact form onto the settings page. Very similar to the way that we put permissions for who can create particular content types on the content type page, like duplicating the permissions grid for particular segments of modules makes it so that users don't need to go two places to configure a module. So it's a great suggestion. It's just an idea at this point. So 3190 is kind of an obvious improvement that we're up for implementation. Hoping to get to implementation. Volunteers welcome on that one. There's a bunch of other items in that meta, 3023, many of which need review. If you're looking for things to review, take a look at that meta and start grabbing some of the sub-issues. Let's see, next up, Color Module. Color Module, there's also a large meta for it at 1905, but that meta has gotten a little overwhelming. The issue where most work has been happening for Color Module, and if you're looking to jump in on improving it, is 3186, which was separated out from that meta, and it's specifically the user interface work that Joseph Flatt has been doing to make configuring Color Module much better in Backdrop. There's also a sub-issue of the meta for colorizing basis, which would also be a great enhancement. I know basis has proven to be pretty popular, and it has always intended to be colorized, but we got a little bogged down in trying to like get a little too ambitious about Color Module. So so colorizing it is not actually that difficult. There's a pull request there. I know it has Wes's blessing. That could just use some testing and is currently in needs review. Okay, next up, Node Preview. So, or bring back Node Preview, which is 3062, issue 3062. Currently needs work. Functionality and testing, or technically, it looks good. Functionality-wise, I think people are really pleased with it. The current holdup is that we have some styling challenges that the buttons for returning back to the node form basically need to be shown as though they are using administrative styling, but you're on a page that is on the front end of the site. So this is kind of like the inverse problem of in CKEditor, we show something in the front end theme inside of the admin theme. And now we need to do the opposite. We need to show the back to node edit form button as something that is displayed in the admin theme on the front end site. And so that is our current challenge, I think, with that issue.
It's not only the styling. Ideally, we would like any contrib module or anything that adds buttons in that submit ribbon to be reflected there, like looking to integrating, for example, Save Draft, which adds a few buttons. So ideally, we would have the same buttons and we wouldn't be rewriting different code for that bit. So we should be reusing the code that sort of like renders the submit buttons if we can.
Yeah. Do you know what the current options are for solving that problem?
At some point, technically wise, I'm not sure what the challenges are, but there has been a suggestion that the whole preview is an iframe. So we don't have to, like pretty much what the work that has been done with a color module, but occupying most of the screen instead of that.
Wow, right. Interesting. Or I think maybe even the opposite, where the
iframe is actually
the ribbon could be an iframe. Yeah, one way or the other. Yep. So still some challenges there, although the core functionality of that is looking pretty solid. I think that we're looking for just more collaboration on that issue. Doc Wellman has been taking the lead on it, and looks like he's been open to doing just about anything to make that happen. But I think that we need to resolve that particular problem, and any ideas as to how to do that, or anyone looking to try to take that on themselves, I'm sure that additional help would be appreciated there.
Yeah, everything else is pretty sorted.
So also probably could use some code review on that one. I think there hasn't been a lot of technical review of it. I've just given it a once over. So other people doing explicit code reviews would also be handy. Very exciting stuff. Next up, core updates, or automatic core updates, is issue 2018. That's another meta, and we've got a number of sub-issues underneath that. Let's see. We've got 2 issues that haven't had any real substantial changes in the past week. Issue 3105, which is allow core updates via the user interface. That one currently needs testing, and I think still has a problem with if authorized.php is necessary, then the automatic core update or the user interface update doesn't work correctly. We kind of have a larger issue around authorized.php and what its future is anyway. Authorized.php is currently used when applying contrib updates to allow if the web server user and the user that owns the files on disk are different, authorized.php allows you to type in a username and password of an FTP user to write those files to disk. But we only use that during contrib updates. Apparently during core updates, it also injects itself, but then it doesn't work. It has potential breakage. But we don't use authorized.php when using installer. And that's just a limitation of when we wrote installer, we just didn't build in that particular complexity. So the question kind of is with authorized.php is we either need to start using it everywhere, or if we're not using it everywhere, then we should take it out. And one thing about authorize.php that has me a bit concerned is that authorize.php and the concept of automatic updates are not compatible with each other. Authorize.php, its entire concept is you have to type in an FTP username and password at the time that you apply an update. And automatic updates implies that the web server can write the files automatically without user intervention. And so either we need to make authorize.php actually store the FTP username and password, which I think is a bad idea, or just insist that the web server always be able to write files, which is also not great, but probably better than storing a password for the entire account on the web server somewhere. So
people that are using Project Installer, they have that requirement. The files have to be owned by the web server. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. And that's why it's interesting, for a Pantheon upstream and for some other services. I think I haven't tried it on platform, but in Pantheon land, when you switch your site to FTP mode, it makes it so that the web server and the files are owned by the same person. It makes things writable. And so they have that functionality largely because WordPress functions the same way. WordPress doesn't have any concept of you have to type in a username and password. WordPress just has the ability to write to the file system if you're using the automatic updates, and that's the end of the story. Which I know from a security aspect, people get nervous about that particular capability, but at this point, it seems like that's the lesser of two evils, like not having automatic updates and having, Drupal get-ins. Like we seem to think that automatic updates are either not worth it or are require too many compromises until we need them. And then all of a sudden it's just like, why don't we have this yet? Yeah, and it's because it requires compromises. So
one thing I have a question about there, I think we should have some kind of a description about that, like on that settings tab in 414, issue 414. I don't know. It could get pretty wordy though, right? But we should probably say something that summarizes what you just said, that, if you're not using Git and you want as low maintenance as possible, then, turn this on. But if you are using Git, then you probably don't want to turn this on, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was thinking something similar, like if the correct permissions are not set, we do not block the installation of Backdrop. But once the site has been installed, then automatic updates has the page for the automatic updates has a message that says you need to correct the permissions if you want automatic updates to work. So this would be the on-off switch. So, and we can point to documentation there. Like we can have a link that points to documentation which people can read.
That's a good idea. Yeah. We could also probably does like the status report check file permissions? So we could probably steal that and pipe it right into that settings tab and say, hey, you don't have the right permissions, or something like that.
Yeah, cool. we totally should do that. There's an issue for increase the pre-flight checks of installer module, I think, somewhere that we could build it into that. So
yeah, but it needs to be an error warning though, and not an error, as in not blocking the installation, just something that says that this feature is not available because you don't have this setting.
Right. And already the installation of modules, I was going to ask you this, in issue 414 for automatic updates, for adding a settings form to configure how they work. Did you put that in update module, Jeff?
I forgot. I probably.
I mean, it would make sense to do that. But the installation of modules is handled in installer module. So it is possible to have update module turned on, but not installer module, which tells you if updates are available, but doesn't actually apply the updates. Because right now, update module shows you if there are updates available, and then the link to actually apply the update for contrib modules is only shown if installer module is also enabled. And so we can put the warnings and the file system permission checks and all of the things like that in installer module, because it should be exclusively responsible for installing new modules and updating modules. It basically does the job of putting the code in place, which is actually where, this update modules via the UI 3105, like that changes some core, but also installer module.
Yeah, I remember jumping back and forth between them on that issue.
Yeah. Anyway, so the overall meta issue, though, 2018 for core updates, we are still stuck on 3105 because of that authorize.php problem. One way to solve that would be to either fix the authorize.php issue that we're faced with right now, or take a longer-term view and potentially consider removing authorize.php so we don't need to fix that problem. And that might solve the problem in a different way. Let's see, package signing. This is an issue in 1992 where we want to increase the security of the delivered packages to make sure that they're not tampered with in delivery and that they're uncorrupted in download. There hasn't been any updates this past week, but that issue has got some exciting things going on in 1992. Issue 2125 is just moving the profiles directory underneath core. I've been saying this for the past couple of weeks, but unless there's any prevention of that, I'll probably merge that next time I'm going through the pull request queue. Let's see. And lastly, 414 is that issue that Jeff just brought up, which is actually doing the application of automatic updates. And there's also a settings form that is part of that as to like what options we should provide to the user regarding like which version should be updated, whether or not it's security fixes or minor releases or just bug fix releases. And so there's some new discussion happening in there about what that should look like from a user interface perspective in issue 414. So we're looking for help there on user experience and language, description of options and things like that in 414. Okay, all of those, very exciting. We'll see, we don't need to make all of these happen for 1.11. We can start with, bits and pieces of any of those above metas, and all of them will be improvements, even if it's not all of those issues combined.
So the way that I see it, package signing and the move of profiles, they don't seem to be technically blocked on anything.
No.
So, and we can have package signing and not be using it, just have it prepared for when we're ready for the updates anyway. So.
Yep, and yeah, exactly. We also can start the package signing improvements on like backdropcms.org and go ahead and start adding the signatures, and then build out core's use of the signatures at a later point. Yep. And then right now there's a pull request in 1992 that makes those changes like in all three places, in backdropcms.org, in project module, and in core. And we could separate that out. We almost inevitably will need to separate those out into separate ones. Right now, it's just all together for demonstration purposes. Okay, more issues here. Let's see. Tags for modules, issue number 37. This is a small enhancement that makes it so that modules, in addition to having a category, also have tags. This got re-rolled in the past week, but took it a little bit too far. And when tags were added, categories were actually removed. And per our previous discussions in that, we were planning on just simply adding the ability to have tags and not substantially overhauling the modules page. But the most recent re-roll took it a little bit too far. So it's been stated in the issue that we prefer to keep the user interface pretty much exactly the way it is now and only add the tagging capability. So we actually just need to be a little less ambitious about the current pull request. So it's been re-rolled, but we're still in a situation where that issue needs work, or the pull request needs work. Next up is better statistics tracking, issue 218. This is a concept that we've been talking about for a long time. We basically need a volunteer to champion this particular issue. We have lots of ideas about the way that this should be implemented, but no undertaking of implementation at this point. In short, we want to decouple the checking of updates from the sending of statistics to make it so that you can have your site check for updates and get automatic updates, but not report the fact that your site is running Backdrop, where your site lives, or any of the modules that we're using. Make it so you can get updates without sending that information, and then have a separate module that is responsible for sending the information about what your site is running, and not just the modules you're running, but also what functionality you're using. And then that alleviates some privacy concerns, but also allows your site to have automatic updates once that happens, while also maintaining privacy. So there's a lot of discussion there in 285, and I suggest reading over that if you're interested. This one is a slightly more minor issue. Issue 2887 is just a small feature to automatically rotate images based on EXIF data. There was some feedback posted this past week, and Graham72 has volunteered to take that on and is working on a re-roll of that particular issue. Rich text editor file uploads. Actually, these last two issues are both file and media image related. Issue 3134 is about the reusability of images when placed inside of a rich text editor. Gregory, I know you said that you haven't been doing too many updates, but I know that you've been active in this issue. Can you give us a summary of this one?
Yeah, although I missed Graham's comments 3 days ago and then yesterday. So this is mostly ready to go. Small UX issues. One of them was in wide screens. First of all, we have decided that the library, the thumbnail library, would be on the left, and then because that's what most users are after, like when we open that dialog. But then this makes it so that all the controls that change the file name or the alt text, or whether the image is centered or not, are on the far right of the screen. So if you want to switch between uploading file and selecting from images from the library, then you have to travel with your mouse across the screen, and this makes it tedious. And this could be solved. The way that I saw it is more easily solved is if when this dialog pops up, we have it so that it's aligned to the right side of the screen so that the library expands towards the left. There is some thinking there that I don't know what we will be doing with, I haven't brought that up yet, about with left to right and right to left languages and what people expect. But this can be a follow-up. Other than that, I think it's good to go. Like I have another comments there.
Yeah, great. Okay, so sounds like not necessarily per usual, but this needs like some UX help, and actually even design might be very useful. The big problem that we have is that just showing a lot of images takes up a lot of space, and it's in a dialogue, right? And so
the other thing is that we made it so that it's clear now when you select an image, and I think hover works as well. It's more obvious, the styling, like there's a border around it, but it's not So other examples from other applications and how that's used, like MailChimp, make the images seem more tidy. Like they center it and they put a very light gray background, so to make the tiles seem that they're all the same size. So yeah, but I need to go through Gam's comments because he has responded. But I read that. All in all, we're in a good place. Like good. I don't know if Wes has any capacity to chime in. That would be great.
Yeah, we should try to rope him in specifically into that one. He's been looking for additional areas in which he can play some design skills. So that would be a really great one and a large impact one. Okay. Okay, and lastly, we're still moving bits and pieces of file entity module, largely from the contribland into core. There's a meta issue for that at 1448, which has a bunch of areas in which the power and capabilities of files could be extended further. Most recently, one that has seen some activity is 2632, which Doc Wilmot is working on making it so that files are fieldable, so that you can put additional field data on to individual files without any other entities associated. He re-rolled that functionality. I think that it's conceptually working, although tests are currently failing, and he's having some problems with pre-configuring that during the installer. So we've got some issues there to work through. Looks like some underlying issues, but we have been seeing some progress in there, and 2632 could be a useful area for some technical capacity if somebody has it, to take a look at that and give it some cross-reviewing.
Yeah. This ticket there and another support request or question that came through that was related to that had to do with views and a certain feature that was not available there that people can use. So the respective D7 contrib module, once installed, it offers this functionality in views, whereas we claim that we have ported it and exited it into core. And I'm not sure if it's a decision that we made when we ported the module of which bits are going to go into Backdrop core, or if it was that because we have not been tracking the progress of that module, we sort of like, we got left behind. So it's either one of those cases. This is actually what triggered the creation of the DCU.
Oh, this particular shortcoming that
we have
files are not fieldable. Yeah.
So we have been thinking about keeping up. There was an old issue about keeping up to date with contrib modules in general, and this would be useful not only for modules that have been merged into core, but contrib itself. We should find a way to notify the maintainers of modules that hey, there's a new version of the respective D7 module. Maybe you should check out what improvements and backfixes. Pretty much what we do with core each time that a new release of D7 comes out. So yeah.
Okay. All right. There's more 1.11 issues in the 1.11 milestone. You can check it out on GitHub. And that's it for the 1.11 updates. Lots of things happening there, and there's more that is always happening. This isn't by any means the comprehensive list of what's happening. It's just where we're trying to put some focus for the next release. So as always, just check out the GitHub issue tracker. There's a lot of things happening all the time. Let's see. Next up, we've got Backdrop for Good. Jeff, do you want to give a little update on the volunteer project that we've got running?
Yep. So Laren spec'd out some issues when he communicated with the partner, and the Hack for Western Mass group, which I'm also part of, and they have very similar focus as Backdrop for Good. So they're interested in collaborating. So I added a couple people from there to the repo. No work started on that yet, but it's on the slate for probably their next month's meeting. So that's great.
Yeah, it is great. Yeah, there's no reason why this needs to be, Backdrop names specifically, like if other volunteer groups for, building websites for nonprofits just so happen to want to use Backdrop, that would be a great foothold for Backdrop in those organizations, and a great help to those organizations to have a tool that, we're building it for them. Okay. Do you guys have any questions or anything that you guys would like to add to this meeting? Okay. If there's anything you guys would like to add to the agenda, please let me know, or post to Gitter, or if you have edit access, just add it right in there. And that's it for today. Thank you guys all for joining. There's lots of really exciting things. Thank you everyone for watching this meeting, joining the meeting, or for your work in the Backdrop issue queue. There's lots of exciting things and more to come. So thank you all. See you all on the internet. Bye.